This game looked like it was going to be a really big one. Then Penn State went out and lost in that crazy 9 overtime game. Although, Furman, as I was watching, I was thinking, hey, the over-under, maybe you don't need as much insurance as you have in past years, right? Because when you're only going for 2, it's hard to stack up as many points in the overtime. Penn State now out to I believe it's 18.5-point road underdog. Ohio State quietly has been playing phenomenally well, and they are an 18.5-point favorite as I look at it right now. That's a big number, but Penn State looked pretty mediocre at best. How do you see this one breaking down? In your mind, is Penn State basically done as a Big Ten East competitor? They have to win this one in order to stay involved.
Yeah, one question before we break this game down, because I know you love to be the rules czar and try and overhaul things from an entertainment standpoint. Does Clay Travis give the college football third overtime 2-point shootout rule a stamp of approval? I thought it was extremely entertaining to watch, but mainly because Illinois and Penn State were both so inept with the plays that they elected to run in those particular situations.
Yeah, and I feel like, not that starting at the 25-yard line and requiring a team to drive in is particularly reflective of overall team talent, but I feel like random 2-point conversion attempts are very, very arbitrary, right? Like, for better or worse, if you start at the 25, you might have to kick a field goal. There are lots of different defensive decisions that you have to make. Offense has virtually the entire playbook open to them. When you're trying a 2-point conversion play from the 3, it feels like it's going to create far more arbitrariness, if that's the right way to describe it, because you limit the overall number of plays, which limits the overall outcome. If I'm the underdog, I think I probably like it more because it takes the kicking game out. A lot of times the better team has the better kicker in general. It takes away your substitution patterns because most of the time on a 2-point conversion, it's not like you're having to change the players that you put on the field. And I think it rewards the team that's offensively more ingenuitive because most teams don't have that many 2-point plays, but basically you're just running goal line offense, right? So I thought it was fun to watch, but it felt like, say, a tiebreak in tennis as opposed to having to win games when you just play to 7 points. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get where you're going with it. I think the word you were trying to get after was variance with that kind of situation, turning it into a 2-point shootout there. I can understand why college football went this way, knowing that some of these defenses are on the field for upwards.
They're trying to limit snaps. It's clearly about player safety.
And I think it makes sense. I mean, the classic between Texas A&M and LSU, I think those snap counts, those teams for the game played Thanksgiving weekend, whether it was 3 or 4 years ago, were out there for 130 or 140 plays, which is borderline excessive. Now, I can see a scenario, maybe it's a hybrid model that you start first and goal from the 10 instead of the 25. But I figured you were really going to advocate for your offensive linemen kicking field goals, backing them up in 5-yard increments.
That's what should
going
happen.
to the 10 to try and be able to make that happen. I figured that's where Clay Travis.
No rush. No, let me explain. Let me explain my theory here. All right. This is, I think, a brilliant idea. In the NFL was where I was talking about it in particular, but I'd be okay with it in college. At college, they don't allow you to tie, right? In the NFL, if you play 10 extra minutes, then you can end up in a tie game scenario. And so my argument, I think it's a good one, is if you finish tied after the 10-minute overtime, this is not, by the way, this is not in the postseason where clearly you have to have a winner in order to have someone advance to the next round of the playoffs. But bring out all 5 offensive linemen. They have to wear their existing pads. There's no rush. You put the ball on the tee, or you can have a player hold it for them, and they attempt field goals, penalty kick, shootout style. I think it would be riveting, must-see television.
So what happens in that third day of fall camp when your star offensive lineman, whether it's a Roger Saffold or a Taylor Lewan, pulls a hamstring and is out for the season because the Titans are trying to prep for this kind of scenario? You don't
prep for this. If it happens, it happens, and you just have to roll with the punches.
I don't think it's going to happen. Now, it might be entertaining to watch in a skills competition, but for a lot of the good ideas you have, we're going to put this one on the back burner.
It's a brilliant idea. It's brilliant.
I don't know if this
All
is
right, so what's going to happen? Is Penn State going to get blown out by Ohio State?
I mean, unless their offense figures things out. I mean, that was pathetic offensively. You had 2 weeks to prepare, and I know Sean Clifford was touch and go throughout the course of the build-up to the game as potentially being the Lions' starting quarterback. But you got to do a little bit more on the offensive side against a Fighting Illini team that's really offered very little resistance against all of their opponents. But what might be worse is that the strength of this Penn State team has been their defense. And they gave up more than 300 yards rushing to Illinois after Brett Bielema challenged his offensive line to be better. So clearly some of the luster off of this game in the wake of Penn State losing in Iowa City and then following it up with a loss in Happy Valley, like you said, is more than a 3-touchdown favorite against Illinois. For me, I just don't know if Penn State has the horses to stay in this game. I know James Franklin has pulled rabbits out of his hat before, but you talked about it. This Ohio State Buckeyes offense feels like it's playing downhill. C.J. Stroud looks to be more comfortable as a freshman running what Ryan Day wants to do. We know about Olave and Wilson. We know about the talented running backs that the Buckeyes have on the roster. But more importantly, let's see what we get from the Ohio State defensive backfield. Because if they're able to slow down Jahad Dotson and Parker Washington, I just don't know if Penn State has enough firepower. Again, I think Ohio State can name the final. I think Ohio State wins out and they get into the college football playoff if they do. And even I can't make a strong case for backing the underdog here in Columbus. For like you said, what should have been one of the marquee games of the Big Ten East pecking order suddenly loses an awful lot of its buzz in the wake of Penn State dropping back-to-back decisions.